Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, H.L. Tinsley. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I've been very excited to come and talk to you.
Yeah. Like I said, and I've said in a couple. I think I said it in DW Ross's too last week. Like between you two, like I just got blown up by everybody. They're like, "Oh, I'm so excited that you guys are having them on." I was like, "Yeah, me too." And I was like, so it was really cool. It felt like felt like a big game, like I'm going to. It was very exciting. So I was very excited to have you on. I know the first time, schedules didn't work out. You were in the middle of writing, and I definitely understand like how that is. So I had you on my second round. That's why my friend, he's like, you always got to go back for round 2 or 3. You never know in people's schedules. So I was really glad we could have you on today, and we can start right in with that first question. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
That is a really good question that I get asked by just random people ask me that.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
I really struggle to answer it because I feel like my writing journey hasn't specifically been a writing journey, so to speak. I think it's been more of a creative journey for me.
Oh, cool.
So I know for a lot of people when they write, it's because it's something that they've always wanted to do, and they've known from a very early age that writing is a path they want to follow. For me, it came a little bit later. So I have always been a creative person, and I've always been involved in arts and theatre and writing to an extent, but not necessarily as an author, a novelist. So I originally started out in theatre. So I was a theatre club kid, and I used to do script writing, and I had a little group of friends, and we had a little comedy troupe where
Cool.
we used to write comedy sketches, which probably weren't that funny, but when you're 12, 13 years old, but they were hilarious. And I always kind of dabbled in different things. So I always someone that has a project on the go. I'm always someone that has something planned. So either something to do with art or creating something. And I think it was just a natural evolution for me. But there was always, with writing, I think something that was holding me back in terms of like the confidence I had in my abilities, and also just my attention span is pretty poor a lot of the time.
I
So
get that.
it's kind of a running joke between my friends and people I work with that I am somebody who always has a project on the go but never actually finishes them. So it tends to be that I'll start something, get other people involved, and then they kind of have to remind me that I actually need to do the work. So but yeah, writing, it was almost like an epiphany for me in terms of starting to write kind of more stories. And I actually started in blogs. I started writing kind of like a semi-humorous blog about unemployment and recruitment. I'd just kind of come out of a job. I got made redundant, and it was kind of like an outlet for me to talk about not only my own situation, but also some of the things that I wasn't happy about in terms of the system that we have here for supporting people and getting them into work and education and training. So it kind of started out with that and then grew, and I ended up writing my first novel, I think, after I'd come out of this job that I'd been made redundant from. And I realised that this was maybe the fourth time in my life I'd given several years to a job that I didn't really enjoy, didn't appreciate me, and I wanted to just take a chance on doing something that I'd always been too afraid to do. So yes, I sat down, like 6 weeks I took to write my first novel. I was writing like 18 hours a day.
Wow.
It's just I think I lost all feeling in my fingers at some point. Like I didn't speak to my family. But it just felt like it was just something that I'm sorry, my chair keeps automatically spinning around.
We love familiars on the show, so it's fine.
So yeah, I sat and wrote this story, and it was like there was this thing in me that had always been there, and just suddenly fell into place. And for me, writing is the thing that has felt most natural for me. It's felt certainly like something that had to happen at the time that it did for me to be able to fully commit to it. but I'm so glad that it did, and now it is literally my whole life. I'm so fortunate. I write for a living. I write as an author. I write blogs still, so it's, you know, it's 90% of my life now, and it's a fantastic journey, but it's certainly not been the most linear.
It's definitely my friend, he was like we were both history teachers, and he's really into nautical history in particular. He's like, yeah, I like to just think of my writing journey as like I got blown off course and back, and yeah, I definitely understand that. I didn't know that you did blogs though. Like I don't know why I didn't know that. So that's really cool. I definitely gonna have to check that out. And your first one sounds really interesting, and
I don't even know if I would be able to find it anymore, because we're going
that's
back
cool.
a few years. But yeah, I've maybe done about 2 or 3 of my own, and then I also blog for other people. So like
Oh, that's
I
cool.
do a lot of work for like games companies and
Oh,
like pop
cool.
culture sites, things like that. So yeah, it's just kind of grown from there, really.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I was reading someone's review and analysis of We Men in Ashley Shadow, and it's funny where you said like, you know, like the system, right? And you didn't quite like it. And it's just so funny because that actually, I was like, oh, it's kind of like a director's cut, because that's what one of the things that he was saying, you know, that like he felt like that, you know, you were saying and trying to point out, you know, that there were different things wrong with the establishment in certain ways. And he very clearly felt that come out, you know, in book 1 for you. And it was interesting, you know, because I was having you on this week, so I read it, and it was a really good article. But yeah, like I could definitely see where, you know, that inspiration came from, I guess. And he was telling me, because, you know, we're both teach history, so he's like, yeah, this is really cool. And you know, I'm like, and you know, and the gas lamp fantasy actually makes more sense now, because I feel like that, you know, that type of, you know, um London-esque, you know, gas lamp fantasy, you know, I feel like a lot there, you know, it's very similar, you know, just the industrial revolution, and you know, a lot of those like types of problems. So I mean, I think that's a great setting for you, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
And I think it, you
yeah.
know, the kind of things that you were thinking of, it actually makes a lot of sense now. So that's really cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, I think for me, I mean, I try to be really careful, because obviously, you know, it's, you're kind of veering slightly into politics then, but I think what I do is I tend to take a lot of interest in kind of the social
Hmm.
side of politics. So
Yeah, yeah.
not necessarily from like, you know, the top levels, but from kind of like the grassroots. And I think that does probably come across in my writing. Um, but I think a lot of it is just because the area that I grew up in, because I am, I mean, I'm kind of technically Midlands in the UK, but
Okay.
I definitely would consider myself to be more of a northerner.
Hmm.
So it's, you know, it's an area with a really rich history of, you know, you've got like the mining culture and the industrial culture. So
Hmm.
just from looking around the environments I'm in, I can see these massive kind of cultural and economic shifts that have really inspired the work that I do. And kind of even now, how things that happened in that time period still influence us. So it was
Yeah.
really the first time you were looking at bringing the class divides together, and, you know, looking at things like unionization and industrialization, and even just like being able to have steam engines and mechanical intervention. So it was such a colossal shift in the way that we used to live. So
Yeah, yeah.
it fascinates me endlessly.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, it's funny that you said that, because we're actually teaching second industrial revolution right now, and actually kind of both, because of the pandemic, so we have to like consolidate. But it's funny that you said that, because I just mentioned that to my kids on Thursday, because we were talking about like what the real issue was. And when you're thinking of like, you know, in terms of, you know, going from, you know, a mainly predominantly agricultural society, like for us here in the United States, like literally since the start of the country, literally up until like it was like 70, you literally have, you know, almost 80% of our country was farming. And then all of a sudden by 1890, you're talking like, you know, 51% of people are now living in a major city. And, you know, it's really almost like a primeval shift, right? Where we go from
Absolutely.
this, you know, I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize like really how big of a shift it was, you know. And you got this way for what, like, you know, like almost like 9,500 years, you know, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden you know, in 30 decades, you know, really you're in like, I would say like 48 years, you have a complete shift in almost, you know, 65% of countries, you know, all over the world. It's like, it really was. I mean, it's no wonder there were so many problems at that time, you know, because you have this, you know, and you go, my friend made a good point in a paper he wrote where it's like, you have this shift of nature to, you know, man-made things, and there was a disconnect there. And, you know, I think it makes total sense, but.
Yeah, and I just think that it must have been so crazy. I mean, I know it kind of happens to an extent with every generation, but
Yeah.
when you're talking a period in time where somebody's grandparents would have been, like you say, part of that kind of 80-90% agricultural world, to suddenly their grandchildren being in a world where, you know, it was now becoming, you know, mandatory that children had to go to school, and there were labor laws coming in, and, you know, and it all happened in such a small period of time. Because people really did at that point kind of revolutionize how they looked at society and say, do you know what, we need to get education, we need to have better medicines, we need to have, you know, better employment. And it was almost like this huge catalyst. And I think a lot of what we have now is still like scarily similar, really.
Yeah, it really is though. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, like I was just talking to my buddy about that, you know, we're like, my wife and I, we're both teachers and we do extra things. We run Airbnb through our house, you know, so it's like, that's where I told her, I said, I just need a break. I was like, I just need to take the summer off just to write. I said, I just need to get a couple of books done, you know, just so I can, yeah, I just feel like I'm so disconnected, you know, because we've been working so much. And it's crazy to think that you work as much as we do, but yet you still feel like you're behind or, you know, whatever. And I don't totally agree with you. I think there's that similar feeling from that time period. I think that's why Gaslamp Fantasy is on the rise personally, because, you know, there are so many similarities. And that's what my friend was saying. He's actually taking your first book, and they're actually reading that for their sociology class. And they're actually
amazing.
Yeah, which I thought was really cool. I was like, oh, that's neat. So he mentioned that to me on Twitter, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I was like, I wish you didn't live, you know, out west in the United States. I'm like, I would come by, you know, I was like, it's too far and it's too much of a, you know, a big deal at this point. But I was like, I'm so jealous. And you know, I think that's really cool though, because, you know, I think that, you know, there are definitely, you know, books like yours where it's so much better to, you know, to kind of use that escapism, but to also still teach, you know, the sociological, you know, aspects. And we're trying to think of that how to do that in my classes next year for middle school. There's a couple of books that we were talking about, and I'm like, well, who says they have to be historical? You know, I'm like purely historical fiction. I'm like, you know, it would be kind of nice to, you know, dive into something that still has the same, you know, you're still talking about the same learning standards and, you know, the same problems, if you will, or same conflicts, you know. And but yeah, I thought that, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And it's like, I want to take that course.
That's really, really cool. Like, I'm honestly a little bit lost for words on that. So
yeah, it was cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really neat. I told him, I was like, now I kind of want to teach at the local community college just to do that, you know. And that's what he was saying to me, because like he was English and I'm like history and studied it my entire life. And, you know, people just asked me recently at a Comic-Con, they're like, well, how does that influence you? I said, well, it influences you in so many ways. I said, people think it's all about fighting and battles. I said, but really it's like what we're talking about, right? It's that change in, you know, human scope. And it's crazy, right? Because you have what, 90, you know, people are trying to figure out how to fly. And then by, you know, World War I, it's like we're killing each other with flying machines. And it's like, I don't think people realize how big of a jump that was. Like you have a bicycle plane, and then all of a sudden, you know, by World War II, you have some of the most sophisticated flying machines, you know, within even a 4-year period. And it's like the industrial machine, it's just like, it's no wonder it hasn't slowed down, right? Because it just keeps chugging along. But I like how, you know, you have taken that setting and, you know, done a lot of really cool things. It was interesting when, you know, people were telling me, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, I get this, you know. And I feel like your cover too just like really, you know, says a lot. Title too, you know. And when they were telling me more and more, I was like, stop. I was like, I haven't read it yet. I'm like it's on my list this summer. I was like, don't. I was like, because somebody said something to me. I was like, dude, that was such a spoiler. I was like, why would you do that? He's like, you'll forget because you talked to too many authors and books. And I said, no, I didn't forget.
Listen, I have to be so careful because I am so bad for spoilers, because I see, I talk to people and I try and kind of get into the conversation, and then I just think, oh my God, I've said something I shouldn't have. So I do have to kind of catch myself on those. But it's funny actually you saying about the class as well, because I actually found out earlier this week that there's a theatre school local to me. It's kind of a couple towns over, and they're actually using the book. They're actually using the characters as their character study for this term. So
That's
I've
cool.
kind of been in touch with one of their teachers, and she kind of dropped me a message and said, would you mind sending us some additional material, so like character building material
cool.
for the kids? So I said, yeah, absolutely, like I'm so pleased to do this, but I will only do it under the stipulation that I can come to the theatre with like a trilby hat and dark glasses on, you know, and just kind of incognito, so I can watch the show. She's like, yeah, come watch it. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
That is super cool. I'm a huge theater geek. Like I never got to do it in high school because I was doing sports, and like we lived further away in the country than my school. So it's like rehearsal was so late, and my parents are just like, we don't want it to affect your grades. And I was so tired by the end of the day. You got to wake up early, go to school all day. And so even to this day, I'm just like, we go to a lot of shows, and I just, that's super cool. That's like my dream, is that somebody's like, yeah, we did a screenplay of you. Cause I actually was about to sell 2 screenplays in high school. And then I decided not to, because I didn't want to have them butchered. I know the company would have butchered them, and I was like, no. And they were like telling me, oh, this is what we're going to change. I was like, oh, it's not even the same thing. Then I was like, I might as well just, and this kind of thing, like, with indie publishing and stuff wasn't a thing back then. So I'm like, kind of glad I did hold off, because, now I have those, those 2 things that I could turn into books, or, or audio dramas or something. So but that's super cool. That's like my dream. That's awesome.
It's one of those crazy things, you talk about the writer journey. It's just something that, if you'd said to me like 2-3 years ago that, students are going to be using something I've written to do character development and stage plays, I wouldn't have believed it at all. But it's such a nice, like, it's kind of very gratifying.
Totally.
To hear that. So it was very cool.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'm so jealous. But I could, and that's like my friend a couple weeks ago, just randomly passing, he was like, yeah, this should be like a screenplay. He's like, this should be like a play, or like, he's like, I want to see this on stage. He's like, I need to see this somewhere. He's like, can you tell her to get a hold of Netflix, please? I was like, I'll pass it along. I'm like, I don't know if I can do anything. I'm like, but I will. I'm like, it's like, but yeah, I was like, the more I was reading reviews and stuff to, and just blogs, to kind of prep for this interview, I was like, that would be really cool. I feel like yours and Crystal's both would be so cool just to, to physically see, like, but I feel like the right people would have to do it, to really get, I feel like Gaslamp has to be done a certain way. And, otherwise it like totally misses its, mystique. I can't remember if it was like, what was it, the Carnival Row one with Orlando Bloom? Like that one, I felt like they did a really good job. Whatever that show was, I was watching for a while.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't think I've actually watched it yet, but I know the one you mean.
Yeah, it was good. I watched like the first. I have to go back to. I watched like the first 3 episodes, but I was like, that's totally like Gaslight, like verbatim. But yeah, I've seen a couple other ones where I was like, not so much. But that's like urban fantasy too. I feel like urban fantasy has to kind of be, done a certain way, and if not, then I feel like the 2 genres are very similar in that way on the big screen. But
yeah, definitely. I think the one I get quite a lot is Peaky Blinders.
Oh,
that would be the dream for me. If the people behind Peaky Blinders could take it on, then
that would be so cool.
That would be good. Yeah,
that'd be awesome. So everybody in the audience, make sure you're sharing this everywhere so that we can make that happen. So I'm expecting at least 1 million shares within the next couple of days, so that we can we can get that going. So yeah, if Holly doesn't have that contract on her desk, all right, by July 1st, then we have not done our job. So yeah,
that's it. So they've wrapped up now, haven't they, on Peaky Blinders? I think it's the last season's just been and gone, so they've got time now.
Yeah. I stopped watching, I think, after like season 2, and then I think they just put on Netflix after that. So that's actually one of those shows where it's like I can't watch, because then I'll just get too engrossed, and I'll have to like rewatch it. And like there's just so many characters where they make me think of so many things, but I have so much to write. So I'm actually there's like that and 2 other shows where I'm not watching anymore until I'm done with my other characters. Otherwise it's like, my friend, we were just talking about that. We wanted to do an episode of like TV or movies, that make you want to write. We always ask people with books, and authors and stuff, but I definitely like Last Kingdom, I love the books, but the TV show just makes me, every time I watch it, I'm like, writing something else. So I
Yeah.
finished season 5, and I feel like I have to take a break before going back through again. Otherwise, I'll never get any project done. So
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with the feeling.
I wish I had more time in a day. So for that second question, so I know we have to update it, but can you tell us a little bit about your SPFBO experience for this 7th competition?
My SPFBO experience has just been the most crazy, emotional ride I think I have possibly ever been on. I mean, it only finished yesterday, so
Yeah.
still in the process of just kind of like decompressing at the moment. I mean, it's been a full year since kind of initially when you go into it through like the semi-finals, the finals, and it's just until you're in it, like you don't really get how it feels.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was kind of talking to some of the other guys that were involved this year in it, and we all kind of had the same feeling when we went into it, that we kind of looked from the outside and had very set ideas of like, oh, this is how it's going to be. And to an extent, obviously, it is. But I think it runs so much deeper than you realize. I mean, I literally feel like I've got SPFBO blood in my veins now because it just kind of becomes this part of your life, and especially, the people that are in it with you as well. Especially the point of being the 10 in the final group. Because it would be so exciting and dramatic if I could say that we were all intense rivals, and that we all hated each other. But the absolute opposite is true. I kind of knew a few of them before going into it, but now all 10 of them are just people that I have so much fun with and so much respect for, not just as writers but as people as well. And the support that kind of I've had from them has been amazing. The support just off readers as well. I didn't realize, I knew SPFBO was a big thing. I didn't realize how intensely emotional people get and how invested people get in it, which is, really funny sometimes, but also really moving, and really it makes you feel validated as a writer for what you're doing. So yeah, it's just been this huge, intense, emotional experience, and it was almost really difficult to come out of it, because I mean, I got my last score really early on. I think I was probably I think I might have actually been the first person to have all 10 scores.
Oh, wow.
So for me, the competition kind of ended slightly before everyone else, which on the one side was really nice, because then I could just kind of focus on talking the other guys in the group through it and just kind of being there. But also it was really strange for me, because it kind of felt like I was part of something but then not part of it at the same time. So you almost get that feeling of like, I'm not quite sure whether I should let go or whether I should still be involved. So yeah, but I think the most important thing above all else is just that the support and the kind of camaraderie that I just got from everyone involved was just beyond anything I could have expected. It really was.
I just always like it because like I said, before we start recording, it's just always fun for me, to have people on and, to get to talk to them and then to see them, in the contest. And it's like I know somebody in the NCAA for March Madness, like I know somebody's playing or something, it's like, yeah, go, 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 go. And it's just, I can only imagine, how it feels to be in it, because it's really fun for us, who talk to you guys, and, it's just cool, it's very, I was just talking to somebody about this recently. It's very, I think it was like me and Clayton Snyder were talking about it with Michael R. Fletcher on Facebook or something, or Twitter, but it really is like, it really brings the community together, which I think is really fun about it, and I mean, everybody's sharing everything, right? Like, I mean, I saw your book everywhere, which is great. And it makes it easier for me, because then I can just easily retweet. Because I feel like, especially with the algorithm now, it makes it kind of hard. And, with the contest, I feel like it just makes it easier, because you just see the hashtag everywhere, and then if somebody, tags you or something, it really does make it easier for us to help you, and everybody else who's in the contest get more eyes on your books, and I think that's I think that's personally like the coolest part of it, and that like, like somebody could put a book 1 in, or a book 2 or a book 10, and just depends on, whatever book they wrote that year, gets in. It's super cool. And it's interesting to see like I don't think fallout's a good word, but where things settle,
Yeah.
and just even, I think
Yeah.
even just to get a sticker, to be able to put finalist or whatever. I love seeing those, when, particularly if I saw someone's book previously, but then now they get the sticker, they can put it on there. That just, that to me,
Yeah.
that's just really cool. It's just you're in the club, so to speak. Like, even if you don't win or whatever, that's really cool. So.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, this is just not something that a few years ago I ever thought I would be able to sit and say, I have an SBFBO finalist sticker on my book, and I think you're right. The kind of, like you say, fallout's not the right word, but I can't think what the word is at the
Yeah.
moment. But I think the just what you get out of it is goes so beyond what you think it's going to be. I mean, for me, what really kind of moved me was when you get a bad review for SBFBO, and you will, it's an inevitable fact of what we do is that not everyone is going to like your work or what you do, and that's kind of the purpose of the competition, is for you to find the correct audience. But when you do get those kind of rough reviews and the lower scores, is just the messages that you get off people, off readers, other writers. It almost got to the point where I felt like I had to say on social media, like, guys, I'm okay, I'm fine, like, don't have to worry. And it was just so unexpected. I didn't think people would take that much interest, not just in me as a writer, but me as a person, and actually reaching out and saying, are you okay, like, are you coping? It was just, really kind of humbling.
Yeah, well, like I said before I start recording, I had some people message me recently, because I said you're coming on, like acting like I had something to do with the contest. And I'm sorry. I'm like, if I did, I would be helping. I said, I don't though. I said, hopefully one day. But I said, yeah, I don't know what to do. So it's funny. Like, I just feel like they're reaching out anywhere. I'm like, you're in the wrong spot. I was like, I have nothing to do with it. But it was just funny. I was like, well, that's cool, that people care enough to reach out to some random person that has nothing to do with it. And I need to go back and like screenshot the conversations. I was just like, yeah, no, somebody commented on something for me. I was like, I'm sorry. I think it's because I share so much, so many of the contest things, I'm like, no, I told one person, I'm like, I'm just trying to help people get their stuff out. I was like, it's a retweet button. I'm like, I'm going to retweet every single, person that, I've talked to or that's in, fantasy, sci-fi, or even if I just think they wrote something great and they're, it's fiction or whatever, nonfiction. I was like, nope, just trying to do my part. I was like, don't have any part of that. So I laughed so hard. And somebody did it for another author too. They were so mad at me. And I was like, I didn't do anything. It's like, I just interviewed that person about their, being in the contest and stuff. So it was really funny. But yeah, it's interesting. I do agree. It is interesting. And I like it because I think you're right. I think it humanizes authors, right? And it, and we do want you, to succeed. And I think it really, I don't know if you saw like 2 years ago, right, when your first book came out, but like around that time, but like everybody was trying to decide if, authors were enemies or friends. And, myself and quite a few people were like, what are you talking about? Like, particularly in India, I'm like, yeah, we're just all trying to, push each other and, sell each other's books. And I buy a lot of books. I probably shouldn't, but I do, and yeah, it was an interesting concept. But I think that this contest in particularly, I feel like the last two, since the pandemic, I definitely think really goes to show, that, more people do, I at least feel like it's shown that more people do, support each other and, want what's best for each other. And my friend made a good point today. He's like, it really like brought out really good things within us the last 2 years that I think the community in particular really needed, particularly with some setbacks and things that we had. So I just think it really showcases like the best qualities, if you will, of, the community. And I think that's why everybody's, had a lot more fun with it, particularly the last 2 years. And they've been a little bit more grateful for it and each other, in particular. Yeah. So yeah, but that's super cool. If anybody else wants to yell at me for Holly's finalist debut, like that's fine. Like I think it's so funny. I was like, yeah, maybe somebody will invite me to the contest. I was like, I don't mind reading and reviewing or, doing whatever. So so for that third one, so what is your book We Men of Ash and Shadow about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Again, kind of the same as my kind of general writing journey is it all came in bits. really. So I'm somebody who I tend to refer to writing chapters as writing in scenes rather
Mm,
than chapters.
mm.
So I'm a very kind of visual person, so more of my influences probably come from TV, movies, and video games than from kind of other books or other
Oh, cool.
writers. I mean, there are certainly some books that would have inspired the ideas behind it, but I mean, We Men essentially it's a gaslamp grimdark, where we're following an assassin slash mercenary. I'm never quite sure which
Hmm.
he would fall under, through this corrupt city, which is on the verge of a revolution. It's very much a kind of socially broken city where, you know, there's a lot of economic strife, there's a lot of class divide. It's very kind of almost Dickensian in its vibe of there
Mm.
is the haves and the have-nots. And it kind of just follows his journey as he discovers more about the corruption and the secrets. It leads him to then find another young man who he takes under his wing as sort of protege, and then the kind of effect that their relationship, which is very complex, has on his work and kind of the dodgy, shady dealings that he gets involved with. So, I mean, for me, I always think other people tell me what my influences are more than I kind of realize what they are. So a lot of the time, this is just stuff that people have said, oh, do you know your book is kind of reminiscent of this? But Assassin's Creed is one that I get a lot of.
Mm.
So I am a huge Assassin's Creed fan. And Peaky Blinders, which we mentioned earlier, Gangs of New York
Ooh.
definitely was one. And the one that I think surprises people is, I don't know if you've seen it, but the show Luther with
Oh,
Idris
yeah,
Elba.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a great one.
So that was actually probably the catalyst for writing the
Oh,
book.
wow.
Was I watched, I forget which season it is now, Luther. I think it might have been season 2, but
Well, that's a
there
good one.
was there was an arc between Luther and a young sex worker,
Oh, yeah.
and their whole dynamic was just so fantastic that I thought, okay, I need to write a novel where it's almost grown around this relationship between this kind of older guy and this younger girl. So someone who's very much seen the world, been there, done that, and is at kind of the end of their not the end of their life, but kind of at
Yeah.
that stage. And then kind of someone who's just coming into the world, and sorry, my chair's on the move again, and just kind of discovering who they are. So I kind of took that idea and I wrote one of the scenes from the book, which is where Vanguard and Karma are talking in the bathroom, and it's kind of the basis for their relationship, and everything really just grew around that. So yeah, for me there was never an intention to write a book with, you know, this is the plot and this is going to be the beginning, the middle and the end. It was always about following these characters and kind of where their relationships take them. So, and
Mm.
I think that's what a lot of people kind of
Yeah,
connect
yeah,
with. So hopefully, yeah, I've done that justice. Hope.
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that I've seen the most, in terms of reviews, or the things that people talk to me the most is about your characters, and I'm kind of surprised at the number of people that talked to me recently about this, the world building, compared to, because I was like, oh, that's really cool, like I love great characters. And then, recently I just feel like it's shifted where people are talking to me more about world building for, particularly book one. And I'm like, okay. And from somebody that talks to a lot of authors and readers, I'm like, that's interesting. That people, usually you have one or the other, or
Yeah.
and so that to me is like really interesting. So I feel like, that really, showcases what you've done really well personally. And that has really intrigued me more for book one, has moved it up, on my TBR pile. Like that's the kind of thing where I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and I love, reader community feedback. And, in particular, you know, like I've seen quite a few reviews, I feel like in the past, like I said, for character development. But yeah, it's interesting to see now people, maybe it's because people are going back and rereading, I think
Yeah, maybe.
it's interesting to see trends and stuff like that. For me, I just think it's very interesting. But yeah, it's clearly, like one of my friends was just like, he's like, yeah, you need to read this book right now. He was like, you need to stop writing your book and that's what you need to do. And I'm like, well, I said, I'm a little burnt out on reading right now. I said, between, trying to fix a draft and all these things. And I was like, I was like, I was helping people out for a little bit, reading some of their, things, not editing, but,
Yeah.
I had a lot of people last summer, in particular fall, be like, hey, can you read this? And I'm like, okay. I'm like, and I'm like, I don't know why you want my opinion, but I'm like, sure. So I did. So I felt like with everything, it was just like, it was crazy. But I told him, I was like, I just need a little bit of time and then I'll do it. I was like, I had some people ask about like reviews and stuff. So I'm going to start reviewing this summer too. So it's high on my list. I promise everybody. So, but I'm really anxious. I like to also wait because I like to talk to authors who I haven't read before in particular, because like hearing, I don't know how to explain it, like hearing things you say and then reading your books, to me, I learn more that way.
Yeah.
And I enjoy them far more. It's almost like a movie trailer, before seeing the movie. Just it's more anticipation, and I'll be like, oh, she was talking about this and that
Yeah.
happens here, and I just have found it had such a better experience for me. So I'm actually, when I have been reading, I've been reading some people that I had earlier, for this season, like Clayton Snyder. After I started reading one of his books, and then it was right in the middle of like us interviewing. But then after we talked and I read Cold West, it
Yeah.
blew my mind. So I know everybody doesn't have that ability, but yeah, it's interesting. I even start to do that now with different interviews for authors, for book, like people I haven't interviewed, but I listen to their interviews, and I find that I do highly recommend that to our audience, because it does really, it just adds to the experience. I feel like I
Yeah.
wish I had started doing it a lot earlier, but yeah, I'm really excited though for book one in particular. Have my friends like, well, you have a very similar type of, he said our characters are pretty similar from what I've let him read on my draft one. And he said some of the things that I'm struggling with, you did really well. So I'm really anxious. I have yours and like four others that are kind of like my work study books, I guess you would say,
Yeah.
to see, what was done, how it was done, and why it was done. And he's like, hopefully that'll help you fix some things. So I'm really excited though, because I've talked to quite a few book bloggers with, like I said, within the last couple of weeks. So I'm very, very anxious to get to that.
Yeah.
So what do you think your most challenging part was when it came to the writing process for, I guess we could say, for either books, for book one or book two?
I mean, I think there was probably a few different things that it was really personally important for me to get right. So the first thing was the representation of
Mm,
definitely the female characters, but more
mm.
importantly the sex workers, and the girls that are involved kind of in the brothels and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that was not just about making them real characters, but also about making them um real in terms of the world as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think one of the things that kind of stood out to me through talking to people and doing research is that people who are in those kind of industries are quite often the invisible of
Yeah,
society.
for sure.
So it wasn't just about making them real people in their own kind of little bubble, but also about making them a part of, the society as a whole. So, we have these girls and they're going out and they're living real lives and they're having real relationships and they're, going to the market and kind of, trips to shops and entertainment. So, they're woven into the fabric of this society that I've built. So that was, I wouldn't say that was a challenge, because that kind of sounds like it was difficult to do. It wasn't. It was a real kind of fascinating thing to do, and it was
Mhm.
a real honor to be able to talk to some people and have people who are very open about giving me advice and experience and things like that, which I am incredibly grateful for. The other thing as well is the mental health aspect as well of some of my characters.
Mm,
So I've never shied away from the fact that Vanguard, my main character, he is kind of very much still suffering from this PTSD that he
mm.
has. I personally suffered from PTSD as well, so it was something that was very emotionally raw for me to write about,
Yeah.
and it gave me that awareness as well of how other people would feel about seeing
Mm,
this character portrayed. So yeah, it was really, really important for me to be respectful, and not only respectful but also truthful about it,
Yeah.
because as we all know, with mental health, people have, for better or worse, they have very fixed ideas of what that means.
Yeah.
You know, and you talk about something like PTSD, and people will, you know, through no fault of their own, because it's not something that is hugely discussed, have a very set image of what this is, how people act, what those symptoms are. But it's a hugely personal experience. It's a hugely unique experience. Yes, there's kind of core aspects of it, but it's a journey that people go through. So it almost felt like I owed it to myself and the friends I've made throughout my own journey to make sure that that was represented. And I hope I've done a good job. I really, really do. And again, I'm really thankful to the people that were willing and open to talk to me about, you know, their own experiences and kind of the journeys that they've been through. So yeah, those are probably the two main things.
Yeah, that's interesting because both of those that you mentioned in particular seem to keep popping up from what I'm seeing, you know, from reviews or just people talking about. I feel like realism isn't the best word for it, but maybe like character connection. It seems like people connect more, you know, with your characters because you took the time to do that. That seems to be like the number one thing to me, at least when I'm, you know, outside looking in, that keeps coming up over and over again. And, you know, that's why people, you know, have suggested, you know, the books, I feel like, to me so many times, is they're like, oh, these characters. And, you know, it's, I think it is a very hard thing, like you said. And, you know, I guarantee you a lot of people who have, you know, are in those situations or have been in those situations, you know, I'm sure, you know, have, you know, great respect for how you handled it, you know. And some people, you know, obviously don't handle them appropriately. So, you know, I haven't seen anything negative about those. I've just seen a lot of positive comments, you know. And I think that, you know, that just shows that, you know, if you take the time to try and do something right like that and do justice by the people that they're inspired on, or yourself, you know, and the struggles that they're going through, I think that people connect with that a lot more than, you know, being the token character, you know, so to speak. So yeah, that's really cool. It's interesting when you're saying things, because I'm like literally thinking back to, you know, actually one in particular, like somebody on Twitter like shared their review. So it's making sense to me now, you know, why people have reviewed it. It's like, oh, that's really cool. It's like, oh, that's why they did that. So it's really neat. So it's one reason why I do these interviews. So that's really cool. So like I've said, so I've heard many people praise this time period and your world building that you chose. So how did you go about building your Gaslight fantasy? Like what kind of things did you decide had to be there? Maybe some things that didn't. Like, how did you decide that these were the things or maybe issues that you were going to tackle in this world building, and maybe some things you left out?
I mean, the first thing is probably that I never really set out to write Gaslamp specifically. I actually, when I first started writing the book, I was probably setting it about 100 years before that period.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of going more for like a 1700 to 1800s aesthetic. And then I think it just naturally was shifting to kind of a later period. So I never really specifically thought, okay, this is the era that I want to use. In terms of like the technology and things, my book runs from between around 1800 to about 1905 in terms of technology. Cool. Which is the great thing about doing kind of alternative worlds, is that you can kind of mess with time a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was funny because I'm talking to Crystal Natar about this, because obviously she writes Gaslamp as well, and we were both saying that it's almost like an automatic draw for us to that period of time, because when we think pain, misery, social injustice, we just automatically think 1800 to 1900. You know?
So true.
This is our social economic sweet spot for misery. But also I think it was just such a fascinating time in terms of it was almost like the industrial version of the Renaissance.
Yeah, it really was.
You know, you had ideas that were coming out that were so revolutionary and so, you know, so progressive. So there was a focus on, you know, educating the layman and, you know, improving employment. You know, you think we went from having literal like workhouses where people and like cholera, that's it, and you know, diphtheria and smallpox, to within, you know, maybe 50 to 100 years having vaccinations, having schools, having, I mean, we had schools before, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, having employment law, you know, there was so much incredible force for change and positive change during that time. So I think it's so rich and kind of ripe for storytelling that I'm at the point where I try to write things in other time periods, and I just automatically find myself just going back that way. But yeah, like even just the kind of stories of that period, probably going from kind of your Alexander Dumas, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, I apologize, kind of the Musketeers, those stories, all the way through to like your Dickens and you know, things like that. So yeah, it's just endlessly fascinating period of time, really.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting, and Crystal and I talked about this too with, you know, with Legacy of the Brightwash. It's just interesting to, not trying to insult anybody, I just, and it's, you know, some people have done, you know, the medieval fantasy or whatever, like that time period still super well. Like, don't get me wrong, it's classic for a reason. You know, we go back to it for a reason, but like, to me, being a history teacher and reading so much fantasy, I'm like, I just like the new possibilities with saying this is a different world, this is the 18th century or 19th century or even 16th century, and here are these, maybe they're, you know, you can tackle problems in a different way. And I think even if you add a level of magic to it, like it really does just, or like, you know, add in Age of Discovery, for instance, you know, like I read one person's where it was cool because they discovered a new continent, and, you know, they were basically redoing the Columbian Exchange in a fantasy world on a different planet. And there was some magic involved. And there were two different magic systems. One was like the Europeans came, and then the other one was like Native American magic. And it was so cool. And I'm like, that to me, I like new things. Like comic books, I'm the same, you know, like I love indie comics because they're always pushing the envelope of, you know, new and creative ideas. And I think now, as you know, I'm an older, more experienced reader, I that's the thing I crave. And I just think with, you know, your and Crystal's books, like I think that also shows that the market is shifting, where people also really want that. Not that new is always better, but like they want something different, you know. And I think we're starting to, with the rise of indie fantasy and sci-fi, you know, just indie in general, I think that people are more open to that. And I've seen more people traditionally published do the same thing. And I think we're seeing an evolution of both genres, you know, which I think is a really good thing. And, you know, a lot of people are blurring the you know, sci-fi and fantasy together in a very unique way, much like Star Wars. And I don't know, just it's a really cool time to be a reader, I think, and an author, you know. And I think, you know, both of your books, you know, really you know, really speak to that. So I think it makes people like me be like, I don't have to do medieval fantasy, you know, I can do this thing. And I just think we're going to get a lot more books out of it if, you know, the trend shifts. And it really makes me wonder, like, you know, what are people going to come up with next, you know? So credit to you, you know, ladies, for, you know, picking something in particular and sticking with it and making it really good. So that's why I said to Crystal, it really shows, you know, that, you know, I think it really shows craft when you can do something new and people like it this much. You know, it really shows you know, that, you know, your characters, and, you know, obviously have a lot of skill in world building. My friend calls it what do you call it, like time period something or other, like building. Like, and I was like, well, that's cool, because, you know, you never, I feel like particularly the last 2 years with your guys' books, you know, I don't think many people like myself thought of time period as world building, but it really is, you know. And I think it adds an interesting aspect when you really think about, like you said, like, you know, technology and, you know, and you know, the differences and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, what's really interesting to see is the correlation between how people feel in kind of the social media world and the outside world,
Mm,
in terms of like where your book goes. You know, I think for people who write in the kind of period that I do, and Crystal as well, is the period was really the first one where it was more about power being shifted into the hands of the people. So
yeah.
before, it was always power of the church, power of the crown,
Yep.
and from kind of, you know, your revolutionary period through to, you know, right through to probably the end of like the world wars, is it was all about taking that power and redistributing it to the people, you know. And it was about giving women the vote, it was about, you know, putting in laws to protect and sustain people. And I think people are relating to that now, because
Yeah.
it's how they feel about the world they live in at the moment. So that's been something really interesting to see over the last kind of 12 months or so, is how
Yeah.
Gaslamp and that kind of time period in literature has grown in popularity, along with kind of the outside world and how they feel about their own situation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. Yeah, I think you're gonna see still a huge increase in that.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably.
yeah, I definitely don't see it slowing down at all. So when it comes to your character development, how do you go about yours? Do you, some people pick somebody they know, some people like myself see a really amazing painting or illustration of a character and then start to visually, put that character together. So what's like your overall process?
I mean, I think I I don't even know if I have a process, to be
Mm.
honest, because I'm one of these people that characters tend to come to me fully formed. So
Oh, cool.
they may slightly kind of change a little bit, and inevitably as they grow, their kind of personalities will evolve. But in terms of, you know, when I first thought of Vanguard and who he was literally a fully formed, you know, adult man with a history and a past, and where he came from I have no idea. He just kind of popped into my brain and there he was.
Oh, that's cool.
um, but I think certainly in terms of visually, I do take a lot of influence from video games. So again, for me, Vanguard was always kind of how I imagined Arno Dorian to be
Mm.
later in life. So
Oh, that's interesting.
Vanguard's in his mid-50s, so obviously, you know, he's getting a little bit soft around the edges, and he's kind of lost some of that athleticism that he would have had in his heyday. But you know, he's still in good nick. It's fine. So there was a lot of influence from that. There's like little kind of nods to the character of Arno in the book,
Oh, that's
which
cool.
I don't know if anyone else would notice them but me, but you know, they are in there. I think more in terms of the secondary characters, I reached out to other people. I knew who I wanted to build them into, but I wanted to add in perspectives from people who, you know, had different experiences to me, make sure that I was representing them correctly. So Kosik is a great example of a character in the book where he was really built from the stories of other people. So
Mm.
I reached out and I was fortunate to be able to talk to some refugees who were just the most incredibly open and generous people with their stories. So I took a lot of what they told me and kind of wove that into just little actions that the character would do. I think it's always really important to have characteristics and physical features for the character, not just in how they look, but how they move and how they
Yeah.
act. I've got this obsession with repetitive actions as well. So if characters have like, I have one character who's always eating fruit like all the time. And yeah, I think I just let my characters kind of grow as organically as I can, really, which doesn't always necessarily help me, because then they don't do what I want them to. But
Yeah, never.
I have trust. I kind of have trust in the process now that they'll get me where they need to be in the end. So yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned the eating, because that's one thing I absolutely love that they added into The Last Kingdom is like Alex Uhtred's always eating.
Yeah.
And I was like I guess for the story goes is that he was just eating and wanted to eat during a scene and he just kept doing it, and then they're like, oh, we're gonna add it. And I'm like, well, that to me, like, it's such a small thing, but it's
Yeah.
just it's his personality, and I'm that way. Like, I'm always snacking. I probably shouldn't be, but it makes that character more real. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's one thing where, to me, it really did make the character, feel more realistic. Like, they're in this tense situation and he grabs an apple and like conks it, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
That's it. I think you've got to humanize the characters as well to make
Yeah.
them more real. It's especially when you write grim, dark, and really and kind of heavy subject matter books. It's even more important to have those human elements and those little kind of quirky moments of joy and frivolity. And I've got a book full of murder and death and blood, but at the same time you've also got characters who are like, they're playing games together and they're making jokes, and it's just you've got to have that little bit of humanity in there as well,
Yeah.
otherwise no one would read it. It'd be too
Yeah. Yeah.
depressing.
Yeah. No, totally. That's awesome. So you have book 2 written now. Are you working on book 3, or are you planning on working on it soon?
Well, I'm in a bit of a like catch-22 at the moment with book 3, because my original intention all along has been to write 4 books.
Oh, okay.
And I have plans for book 3 and I have plans for book 4. However, I'm now kind of second guessing myself a little bit about whether to do book 3 and 4 as one and have them as one huge great big book, or 2 slightly shorter ones. Because my first book, We Men, was quite short, and then the second one, The Hand That Casts the Bone, is quite a bit longer. And I kind of feel now that if I do 3 and 4 separately, I'm going to be going back to doing quite short ones. So yeah, there will definitely be a book 3, and it is certainly in process of being drafted at the moment. I wouldn't say it's particularly far into the process, because to be honest, I think my brain just needed to reset a little bit. But yeah, whether that will be a 3 and a 4 or just a 3, I'm now wavering over. But it will still be the same story. It'll be the same story that has been planned from the beginning. So hopefully people will forgive me if I do 3 instead of 4. I think at the end of the day, it's right. We need to write the story the way it needs to be written, and however it's going to best work for the readers as well. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. I have known since day one what is going to happen to all of these characters.
Oh, that's cool.
Now it's actually happening. I do feel very emotionally invested in it.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody that cries at all, but I think I got to the end of the second book, and I almost had like this kind of emotional release where I was like, oh no, now I know what I'm going to do for book 3, and I'm not ready.
That's so funny.
So yeah, I need to get over that first, and then I can properly write it.
It's just so funny they just said, because I just had D.W. Ross on, and he just said the same thing about his book 3, and he's just like, I got done with the draft, like second draft, and he was like, I just had to like walk away for an hour. He was like, by myself. He was like, and I told him, I said, I get that. My first draft, I was like, feel so bad about what I just did to this one character, like these 2 characters, and I was like, I also feel really bad because I know in draft 2 and draft 3, like, like it's gonna get worse, and like I hope people like I haven't been able to work on it for the last like 2 months because I just like I feel really bad. So yeah, I definitely understand that. That's funny.
I think it's knowing as well that you're gonna make decisions, inevitably, that other people are gonna be really angry at you for making, but you have to make them for the sake of the story being what it needs to be. But yeah, I'm always worried about upsetting people, and so I apologize in advance. I'm sorry.
I'm actually looking forward to it, because I'm like, if you can upset people, I feel like that means that you're if they're so upset they give you a 1-star review because you did something in a book that affected them that much, I consider that great writing. And you know what I mean, like, because otherwise they would just be like 3 out of 5 or whatever. But like if you can anger somebody that much where they're gonna give you a 1 star and fill out a whole review for reading the book, I think it's like Dirk Ashton has a very famous one where like book 2, I think this guy DNF'd at 97%, thinking his favorite character died, and Dirk's like, he could have just read 20 pages later where the character didn't die. And this is so funny to me. I'm like, 97%, like, why not just figure out what's going to happen? But I'm like, well, that's great writing right there. Like when we had our interview, I was like, that's amazing, because that means that your writing affected him that much and he loved the character that much that he would DNF at 97%.
That's getting to a level of anger that is up there. It really is.
I told him, I said, that's my goal now. Like, that's my goal for book 2, is to anger somebody so much that they get to 97% in DNF. Like, he's like, well, that's a pretty lofty goal. I'm like, but I think I can do it. particularly after what I've done to some of them in book 1. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really funny. It's also funny that you mentioned, like trying to decide between 3 and 4 books. I feel like a lot of people have, I've interviewed so many people lately who have said the same thing, like they, are not sure if this should be 3 or 4. Some people have consolidated, some people have, expanded. I had somebody who expanded to a book 5 the other day, and I was very surprised. And they're like, yeah, no, they're like, I spaced it out this way, add a little bit more here, and then read it. I was like, wow, that was a lot of work. But same thing you said, just trying to get the story told the right way. So yeah,
definitely.
Yeah,
this
that's
is the
awesome.
great thing about being indie as well, and being self-published, is that you do have that amazing power to change your mind whenever you want to and make new decisions. So definite bonus.
Yeah, no, totally. Oh, that's awesome. So for that last one, so any news, updates, promos, current projects you'd like to share with us? Talked a little bit about book 3. Anything else you got going on right now?
Like I said, I've just brought out book 2, so I'm going to get a little plug in for that while I'm
Perfect.
here. I've also literally, I think about 2 days ago, the audiobook has come out for book 2
Oh,
as
that's
well.
cool. Must have missed that. Okay.
Is narrated by RJ Bailey, who did the first book for me, who is just a phenomenal narrator. And
Awesome. Yeah.
Literally, I think he's becoming like the biggest like indie author narrator out there at the moment.
Yeah.
He's just blown up on social media, which justly so, because he's fantastic. So really happy that that's come out. Book 3, as I say, is in early stages, so it is being worked on. I also have a project that I'm going to be working on probably over the next 12 to 18 months, which is an anthology project, which at the moment I am not at liberty to discuss too much, purely because I haven't asked the other person that I'm working with if I'm allowed to. So I should probably check in with him at some point. But yeah, really excited to be involved in that. We're going to be diving into dark fantasy with kind of a horror flavor to it.
Oh, cool.
We've got a load of amazing authors on board with it. So we have 12 authors at the moment who are going to be contributing.
Oh, cool.
And it's just going to be a mixture of artwork and graphic novel and short stories. And yeah, it's going to be a really, really fun thing to work on.
Cool.
So that's what I've got going on at the moment. So
oh, that's awesome. I must have missed the second book for the audio book coming out. I know it's crazy 2 weeks for me. So I'll make sure that we get that link in there. That is super cool. I know a lot of people that will be very excited about that. So that's awesome. All right. Well, Holly, thank you so much for coming on again. Congratulations, for getting so far, with the contest. I know it's very nerve-wracking and stressful at times, but we're also excited, to in the community, to see, your book do so well, and hopefully in the future, right, you can go all the way. So that'd be awesome. It'd be really cool. Like I said, I'll email you everything. Just want to remind our audience, make sure that, you go into the description anywhere where you are watching or listening to this. By the time you listen to this podcast, it will be on Apple Podcasts. So make sure you do that. Go to Holly's website. So make sure you go buy her books, because that's why we're here. And thank you so much for listening. And Holly, thank you so much for coming on. It was really fun to have you. I got quite a few notes here and things to think about. So it's always helps me for my Sunday writing. It's the best day of writing for me for a reason. So I want to thank you for coming on. And if you have anything else you want to come on any other time, any other news or anything like that, or you just want to come by and chit chat, I will be inviting people for some panels and things. So I'll be sending those emails out soon. We're going to do an all-female author cast, as well as just some different world building things like that. Gaslamp Fantasy, Crystal had asked me to ask you to come on, so hopefully we can get you two on along with Emily Inkpen. I'm looking to do one more female author for that one, for Gaslamp. So if you know anybody, let me know, and we'll have a really fun day doing that at some point soon in the
Yeah,
summer.
that sounds
So
great.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
like really excited for that one. I'm like ready for that one.
it's going to be chaos. You already know it's going to be chaos.
Well, it's about time we have our own chaos episode, like the Wizards, Warriors, and Words guys. But yeah, I was just, my friend was like, oh my God, he was like, that would be so amazing. I'm like, I know, right? It's like I just need one more female author that does Gaslamp. So yeah, so I'm really excited for that. So so look out for my email, and we'll get this posted for you. And yeah, I hope to talk to you on social media, my friend.
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you very much for having me. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anytime. You have a good rest of the day, and I will talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.